Welcome back to Dark Night Scare. In today's video, I am sharing 6 highway, true scary stories. Stay tuned and please subscribe this channel. And like this video. Thank you all. Now let's start. It occurred on the night I was designated driver for my group of friends following a party. My friends were Michael, Eddie, and Daniela. We live out in the country, so whenever we wanted to go to the bars or parties, we had to travel long distances. That's why it's such a big deal for one of us to be sober enough to drive. We were driving down Highway 5113, which is unlit and littered with the occasional house or two, but mostly forest. The road leads to town, where most of the bars are. This story takes place on the way back from town. Daniela started to cry because she had to piss really bad. I told her she'd have to wait a while longer, but not gonna lie, I started to get the urge as well. That, mixed with the fact that Daniela was now screaming in her drunken fit, made me figure we should pull over to the side of the road and just piss somewhere in the woods. Daniela got out first and disappeared into the crops. On one side, I went to the opposite side of the road and slightly into the woods, just because I'm the type of person who can't have people watching me piss. I finished first and got back in the car. Eddie and Michael were singing along to the roaring rap and music playing on the radio, while I pretty much just sat there in silence, growing impatient. My 2 drunk friends didn't seem to find anything strange about the fact that Danielle had now been gone for 5 minutes. So I got back out to call her name. Michael has a much stronger voice than I do, so when he screamed for her, it would be impossible for her not to hear. But still, she didn't call back. I didn't want to go into those crops, but I kind of felt like I had to, since she's my friend, and I was the most aware at that moment. I forced Michael to come with, since I was afraid to go in alone. Eddie stayed in the car. He was just too far gone at this point. With the flashlight from my glove box, Michael and I pushed our way through the thick, overgrown crops. We walked, in the only direction we could think to go, straight away from the car. Michael was calling Danielle's name while laughing his arse off. I can understand why he found it funny in his condition, but I just wanted to make sure she was all right and get home. Over the sounds of our own footsteps brushing crops aside and Michael's laughter, I heard something else in the near vicinity. I put my arm out to Michael's chest to halt him. Now, all that could be heard was the night breeze blowing through the crops. "What is it?" like I whispered, to which I responded, "Shh." Michael called out Daniela's name again. I joined in, figuring it was just her trying to sneak up on us and scare us. And again, the footsteps stopped. So we walked a little deeper into the crops. That's when we came to a narrow clearing stretch. I don't know much about crops and farming or anything, but it seemed to be some little stretch for people to walk through. It was probably the width of 2 people, just enough to walk through. I looked to my left as far down as the light would let me see, and then to the right. I could hear 3 footsteps, and then a couple of crops pushed outward into the opening, as somebody stepped into view. At first, my light was only revealing their legs, so by default, given the circumstances, I assumed it was Michael. However, the light revealed it to be not Michael, but instead, some random man who I'd never seen before. His facial features weren't clear enough to give a good description, but he didn't look friendly. I ran for it back in the only direction I remembered coming from. I guess I ran so fast that it only took me about 10 seconds to make it back to the car. Eddie was passed out in the car at this point, so I didn't bother trying to get help from him. I was honking the horn, again, hoping for Michael's attention, and hopefully Daniela's. The sight of that man just disturbed me. I didn't know if he owned this land or not. I continued honking the horn until finally, Michael came out of the crops, dragging Daniela, who seemed to be out cold. I got out to help him lift her back inside the car and plop her on the seat. Michael pointed out the gash on her forehead, as if she had been struck with a heavy, sharp object. Michael seemed to be sobering up pretty quickly due to the situation. He advised I drive to the nearest hospital, which was 10 minutes away. The drive there was not fun. It was full of panic and yelling. We brought Daniela in to have her wound treated as soon as possible. It was only then that Michael explained to the nurses, not me, that he saw some guy dragging her collapsed unconscious body before fleeing deeper into the crops after noticing him. He never mentioned that in the car, but it made perfect sense now. That man in the crops with us that night did this. Daniela was awake after she got all stitched up, and she had no recollection of the entire night, from the moment we stepped into the party to the moment she got struck in the head. 12:17, according to the green clock shining bright on my car's dashboard. I still remember that number. As I was driving home from the night shift at the pharmacy I worked at, taking the highway at this hour is a little dangerous since there's no lights, usually no other cars. And commonly deer would walk out onto the road and you wouldn't notice them until it'd be too late if they were in your direct path. That's why I always drive slow on it, 50 max. As the road curved to the left, a clear row of reflective lights appeared on the horizon, which I quickly realized was the reflective tape of a row of traffic cones, as well as a flashing blue light in the distance. In front of them, it seemed to be the reflective material on a safety vest. I was so confused, trying to figure out what the hell this was about, that it didn't even hit me that I should be slamming on the brakes until it was almost too late. The car came to a halting stop as the hard screeching of my tires stopped, and the man wearing the reflective vest started walking over to my car, arms out, waving. I guess he was telling me not to move the car. As the man got closer, I could see what appeared to be a police uniform under the vest. He knocked on my window with the joint of his pointer finger, so I took that as lower your window. I rolled down the window, better revealing the man's face to give a good description. He was black, about 6 foot, skinny, slight stubble, and a left earring. He was kind of young, I'd have to guess around 25. He spoke in a very low, non-commanding voice, especially for an officer. He said, "License and registration, please." I paused for a second and asked if I did something wrong, because I definitely wasn't speeding. He paused as well and looked slightly to the left and then back at me. "Sir, this is a sobriety checkpoint," he said, once again in a very non-commanding voice. I asked why he would need my ID and registration, then if I had not yet been suspected of anything. He leaned back from my car and asked me to step out of the vehicle to begin the test. I opened my door and stepped out immediately. I noticed the cop towered over me in height. He took a roll of tape out from his vest pocket and leaned it down onto the ground, stretching it to a length of about 15 feet. He told me to step on the end of the roll of tape and place my arms out to my sides as I walked across the tape in a straight line. I easily did it with no issues, with the cop directly behind me the whole time, uncomfortably close. When I got to the end of the roll of tape, I could more easily see that blue flashing light. It wasn't sitting on top of a police car, it was sitting on some older small sedan. I looked back at him and asked to see his badge. He just looked at me with the blankest stare. It started to sink in, I literally mean that, because I felt like my heart was sinking. This guy wasn't a cop. He said something next that I couldn't quite distinguish at first, but as he got to his car, I assumed he said, "I'll go get it 1 second." He was bent over into his car, grabbing something. While he was distracted, I ran back to the car. He looked at me as I started the car and raised a gun up to me. It goes without saying, I put the pedal to the floor as the car jumped into an acceleration through the traffic cones. I saw the headlights of the guy's car go on as I was a few hundred feet away, but at that point, I was already going over 60, and there was no way he'd be catching me. I got off at the next exit, and as soon as there were streetlights around, I turned off my car lights to draw less attention as I finished the drive home. I only wish I had a dash cam at the time so I could have gotten it on video. I swear it would have wound up on the news. I was taking a drive from Maine to Upper New York to spend the week with family. I left right after work, around 5:30, so I didn't anticipate getting there much past 1 in the morning. I had the top of my Jeep Wrangler off so I could enjoy the hot weather. I was somewhere in Vermont, well past midnight, when the gas light flicked on and the car started beeping. Unfortunately, the gas gauge in the car was broken, so there was no way to gauge how much gas was left. I was told by my brother, who drove the car the previous day, that he filled it up to the top, but clearly he was either mistaken or lying, because I had not used anywhere near a full tank's worth of gas. One of those blue service signs zoomed past. I could see a gas station symbol in one of the boxes, so I turned off that exit onto a desolate road, which surely led to some kind of civilization. I wouldn't be finding out anytime soon, however, because the car started jittering and bumping around a bit, making weird noises that didn't sound good at all. A few seconds later, the acceleration stopped and the car came to a helpless halt. I couldn't believe it, but I actually ran out of gas. I hopped out of the car and got on the phone with AAA, telling them my exact location. They said they could have a guy out to me in at least 20 minutes. I was grateful, but at the same time annoyed that I'd be waiting now for at least 20 minutes. For about 15 minutes, I kind of just strolled around my car slowly, looking down at my phone, texting friends about the situation and checking social media. It was so quiet. No sounds of distant traffic, no passing cars, just the sound of crickets and other night creatures in the woods. Then, I heard something walking around in the woods. The footsteps were decently heavy, so I had a hunch it was a deer or something, but the possibility of it being a bear wasn't far-fetched, given that this was bear country. I walked around to the passenger side of the car, now where the woods were and where the sounds were coming from, just in hopes of seeing a deer or some other harmless animal. Then there were two clapping sounds. It actually sounded like a person clapping their hands. I moved a little closer to listen for it. Again. This time it was 3 claps. I called out to the woods, hoping in some weird way that someone would answer. But after I did, the clapping didn't happen anymore. I just stood there, waiting for something to happen. But it was just silence, so I got back in the car and just waited. I heard footsteps once again coming from the woods, coming in my direction. Then it just stopped. I looked outside and saw a head peeking from behind a tree just ahead. It almost looked lifeless. The eyes, they just looked so lifeless. I couldn't even tell if they were looking at me or not. I was so focused on these details, I didn't even think to scream at the horror of what I was witnessing. I cranked the windows up on both sides and turned off the headlights. However, hiding in the car didn't make me feel much safer, since the entire top was off. Without the headlights on, there was complete darkness. I couldn't see 2 inches in front of me, yet I was surrounded by the night noises of the forest. I was ducking down below the dashboard, doors locked, yet still completely exposed to the outside, praying not to hear any sudden sounds, like footsteps. I felt the sinking feeling in my stomach, however, as I heard someone grab the car door handle. I tried my best not to move or make any noise. I was waiting for someone to start pounding at the glass, or, at the very least, reach around the opening behind the front door to just unlock it. I was so exposed. It wasn't even funny. And then I felt a hand aggressively grab onto my back. I simply lost it and screamed at the top of my lungs. But suddenly, the hand released its grip on my shirt as light began to fill the area, and the sound of a truck engine pulling up the road was music to my ears. I sat up and turned around to see the headlights of a AAA truck. But whoever was grabbing me was long gone already. I ran outside to greet the man who stepped out. He was a big dude in his 40s. I basically cried to him about what just happened, taking huge breaths in between each sentence. Something about his personality and presence was just calming and reassuring, however. He filled my car up with gas, and we both went on our ways. Even though something about that man's aura just calmed me down, the memory of what happened that night is still haunting, and the image of that lifeless head peering around that tree is imprinted in my brain. My good friend Carter and I were on a road trip, heading to visit some college friends. The drive was quite far, about 15 hours total, but we figured between the two of us, we could manage it without stopping. I started driving, and after around 4 hours, Carter took over the wheel. The plan was for me to get some sleep during his shift, but honestly, I couldn't manage it. I don't know what the issue was, but I just couldn't get comfortable. So, by the time it was my turn to drive again, I was even more tired than when Carter had started. I could keep my eyes open and focus on the road, but somehow I failed to notice the gas tank getting extremely low. We were in Carter's old Chevy, which lacked any modern tech to warn you about a low tank. It just had a gas gauge that I never glanced at. It wasn't until the car began sputtering that I suddenly realized we were out of fuel completely. Carter quickly woke up and started looking on his phone for the closest gas station. But in less than 30 seconds, I had to pull off the highway because the car wouldn't accelerate anymore. I felt incredibly stupid. To make matters worse, Carter said the nearest gas station was 4 miles up the road. We were kind of stranded in the middle of nowhere. It was just empty fields all around, and there weren't any other cars on the road. We discussed our options for a few minutes, but ultimately, Carter decided he'd walk to the gas station and get a canister, while I stayed with the car. Maybe not the smartest plan, but it felt like a waste to call for help and pay $200 just for gas when the station was still within walking distance. Even though it was 1 a.m. and dark outside, Carter didn't seem bothered as he left the car and started walking down the road. Within a minute, he was out of sight. I sat there and basically just thought about how stupid I was for getting us into this situation. But just a couple minutes later, I saw headlights coming down the road from ahead. They came down and passed by, but they were moving much slower than they should have been. I think the speed limit was 55 or 60, and they passed by going maybe 15 or 20. I watched in the side mirror, and they didn't speed up after passing. They slowed down even more, eventually stopping and doing a 3-point turn to come back around. Honestly, I didn't want to admit I was out of gas or needed help or anything, and I didn't have to. They came back down the road and passed by even slower this time, like maybe 5 miles an hour, probably staring through the windows at me before speeding up and heading back the way they came. What was that all about? I kept my eyes fixed on the road for the next few minutes, waiting to see if they came back around. I had a pretty bad feeling about it. Maybe it was just my gut, but I started to think something could go pretty wrong soon. I got my phone out and called Carter. I just wanted to let him know and maybe ask him to hurry up if possible, but the phone just rang through. He didn't pick up. That definitely made me worried, but maybe he just had his phone on silent or lost service along the road. I waited a minute, then called again. Still nothing. At this point, I definitely wasn't thinking rationally, but I made the decision to leave the car and try to catch up with Carter. I think it had only been 10 or 15 minutes since he'd walked away, so if he was still walking, I figured I could jog and catch up in just a few minutes. I got out and made sure to lock the car, then started jogging down the side of the road. It was incredibly quiet out there, so quiet that every time I stopped running to catch my breath, I'd notice the ringing in my ears, only because there wasn't even the slightest sound to cover it up. I jogged for 15 minutes. I figured I should have caught up to Carter by then, unless something made him start jogging or running for some reason. I decided to pull out my phone and call him one more time, and it was right then that I heard the sound of it ringing. It was very faint, coming from the distance somewhere off the side of the road. I looked out at the emptiness past the shoulder of the road and just barely saw a light glowing in the grass. My body tensed. Carter. He didn't answer. I couldn't see anything at all except the faint glow of the phone screen. I took a few steps off the road and into the grass, calling out again. Finally, I got a response. I could faintly hear Carter's voice coming from somewhere near where the phone was, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I hurried closer, and Carter yelled again. And this time, I could hear he was telling me to get down. I still couldn't even see him yet, but I did what he said, ducking into the grass. And that's when I looked back and saw a car coming down the road. I immediately knew it was the same one I'd seen moving slowly just like before. They were looking for us. Or Carter, I guess. They made 3 or 4 turnarounds, slowly passing the area and very obviously searching. Once it seemed like they finally left, we got up and ran to the gas station. Carter explained that the guy initially pulled over and tried to get him to get in his car. He said the guy was extremely creepy and didn't hide his bad intentions. After Carter refused, the man got out of his car and Carter instantly took off running. I guess the guy thought he'd just keep running down the road, so he got back in his car to chase him. But Carter ran off the road, jumped in the grass, and just hid. At some point, his phone fell out of his pocket, and he was too scared to get up and reveal himself, so he just stayed hidden. Anyway, we made it to the gas station and were able to get help. We also reported the guy to the police, describing his car and everything, but they never found him. It was definitely a horrifying close call, and I feel really bad even still for being the reason we were put in that situation. One thing's for sure though, I'll never forget to fill up the gas tank ever again. This was back in 2014. I hardly ever went on road trips back then, mainly because I rarely had time to take multiple days off just for driving, plus the extra time needed to actually enjoy the vacation. However, I was between jobs when my family was planning a surprise birthday for my dad, who was turning 50. Back then, gas was much cheaper than it is now, and flying was significantly more expensive compared to the cost of gas. So, both to save money, and because I didn't have a job, I decided to make the drive. To be safe, I planned it as a 3-day road trip. So, after the first full day of driving, I pulled into the nearest motel and booked a room for the night. It wasn't the nicest place, but I didn't mind. I slept in until 11 hours, then packed up and opened the door to head out, only to be startled by a man standing right in the doorway. "Excuse me," I said. I tried to get past him, but he didn't really move, making it quite awkward. The man looked to be in his mid-40s and had heavy bags under his eyes. Just overall, not a friendly-looking face. As I moved the rest of my stuff into the car, he remained creepily standing outside the motel room, watching me. Thankfully, I wasn't staying there any longer. I checked out of the motel and got back onto the road. This was my longest day of driving. I planned to get at least 10 hours in. The first while went pretty well, I'd say. A lot of it was through towns and cities, and it wasn't until 5 to 6 hours in that they faded out and it became more rural, with long stretches of road. Once I realized towns were getting few and far between, I stopped at the next gas station to fill up. I paid and started the pump, then went inside to get a coffee for the road. When I was heading back to my car though, I saw someone pull their car up really close to mine. From the front, it looked like their bumper was touching the back of my car. It was a deep red, old Corolla. Nobody was outside of it putting gas in, and the windshield was tinted. I couldn't see anything at all through it, but knowing someone was in there, I couldn't shake the sense that they were watching me. I took the pump out and got back in, leaving the gas station. Almost immediately after, that car left too, and pulled up behind me to merge onto the highway. I was hoping this was all just a coincidence, and just continued with my drive. I noticed them behind me for a while, maybe 5 or 6 cars back, but as the sun set, I couldn't really distinguish what cars were what. I could only see a cluster of headlights behind me. As it got later, fewer and fewer cars were out, and I went about 4 more hours without seeing that car again. I'd almost entirely forgotten about it, figuring it was never anything to begin with. I was more concerned with trying to keep myself awake now that I'd finished my coffee. The nearest main city was still 2 hours away, and I really wanted to make it there and get a nicer hotel. Maybe even check out the city in the morning. But that was only if my eyes would stay open long enough. I thought maybe if I stopped to get another coffee, not even for the caffeine, but just for the distraction of constantly sipping it, maybe it'd be enough for me to push through the next 2 hours. At the next gas station, I merged off the highway. Right away, I could see it was closed, the convenience store part. I was pretty disappointed, but I did need to top off my gas anyway, so I pulled through and started filling it up. Almost right away, I saw a single pair of headlights pull off the empty highway and start down the exit ramp toward the gas station. This place was already creepy on its own, just a standalone dark gas station with nothing around it. Couldn't even see past the outdoor lights. So, when I recognized the car coming down as the deep red Corolla from the other gas station, my heart rate instantly went up. I couldn't stop myself from the eerie thought of if I was being followed. I hurried to unplug the nozzle and put it back, but the car pulled in extremely fast, not even going up to the pump, but pulling right up to the side of my car by the driver door. I was just able to get in before the passenger door of their car opened. A man got out, not even hesitating to run up to my door and try to open it. It took only a split second of looking at him to recognize the guy as the same man from the motel. Those unsettling eyes sent chills through me. I turned my car on, and when he realized he couldn't open the door, he stopped trying. I shot a glance at him as I pulled away, expecting to see anger or frustration. But what I saw was even more disturbing. He was grinning from ear to ear, like this was funny, complete psychopath. I sped it up back to the highway and didn't stop until I reached the city. Thankfully, I'm almost 100% sure I wasn't followed that time. What really scares me is that the man got out from the passenger seat of the car. So, someone else was driving him and was in on whatever sick idea that guy had in mind. They followed me for over 10 hours from the motel, and even worse, they could have been following the day before without me ever knowing. I still find it hard to forget that road trip even a decade later. A few years ago, when I was in college, I was heading home to meet up with my family over winter break. The drive was nearly across the entire country, meaning multiple long days in a row of non-stop roads. I was a broke college student though, so I wasn't booking any hotels or even a motel. I packed some blankets in the back seat and figured I'd sleep wherever I could whenever I got tired. Around 1 a.m., and after 11 hours straight of driving, I finally called it quits for the night. I was starting to get dangerously tired, so I found the next rest stop I could potentially sleep at and pulled over. It was one of those small pull-offs right on the side of the highway meant for just a few cars or trucks. It had a little building with what looked like a washroom and a couple of vending machines. There was only one other car there, parked in the spot farthest back, so I parked in the opposite spot to give us both some privacy. Then I got up to stretch my legs and used the restroom really quick. It definitely wasn't clean in there, which was kind of gross, but I did my business, then left to go back to my car. When I did, there was a man standing right outside my window. He was looking in at what I had inside. Can I help you?" My voice clearly startled him. He nervously took a few steps back and chuckled, saying he was trying to see if I was in, there to ask if I had some cash for the vending machine. My car was basically a fishbowl. All clear, untinted windows that made it easy to see whether or not I was inside, so there was no reason to be pressed up against my windows, looking in like he was. "Yeah, I got no cash on me." "Sorry, man," I said, walking around him to get back in my car. But to my surprise, he didn't leave. He actually tried to start another conversation, asking me what brought me out here tonight. I'm on a road trip. I'm sorry, but I really need to get some sleep. I can't really talk right now." I got in my car, and the guy gave a sorry wave, then walked down to the other car and got in. I was a bit relieved to see he got in the car and wasn't just some homeless person being creepy at a random rest stop. To be honest though, I think I was too tired to even feel uncomfortable or care what that man was up to. I just wanted to sleep. Thinking back on it though, and in a normal state of mind, I probably would have just left and gone to the next rest stop. I reorganized the mess in my front seat, tossing everything in the back, then leaned my seats as far back as they could go and tried to get comfortable. I had my eyes shut for just a few minutes before I could tell some lights were moving around outside my car, which made me open my eyes to see what it was. I sat up, seeing in the mirror that guy had moved his car right up behind mine. I watched for a minute, unsure why he'd moved at all, but with things getting a little too creepy, I knew I had to accept the situation and just find somewhere else to sleep. I pulled my seat back up, put my car in drive, and got back on the highway. I had a few choice words to say under my breath about that guy as I pulled away. There weren't many places to stop on this stretch of road, so this inconvenience was going to cost me at least 30 to 40 minutes. It was dangerously tiring how tired I was on this drive. My eyelids would close for a second or two, then shoot back open once I realized I was dozing off. This pretty much went on and off the whole way until finally I reached the next rest stop, or what appeared to be a rest stop. It looked very similar to the other one, except it was without a doubt abandoned or out of service. The building was all taped up and decaying, and graffiti covered most of the exterior. Still, it was a place to pull off, and I figured I wouldn't have any issues sleeping here just for a few hours. Not sure if it was because the place was quiet and abandoned or me just being really tired, but I passed out within a minute. I have to say, before I woke up, I got some pretty good sleep. I think I slept from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. before I woke up suddenly to a crash against my car. The whole car shook as I scrambled to figure out what the hell happened. I looked in my left mirror, seeing a car's headlights parked right behind me. Then I looked in the right mirror. There was a man right beside my car holding a metal baseball bat. He swung it again, shattering the back window. I kept yelling, "What the fuck?" over and over, trying to get my keys and get away. The man came up to the passenger window, and I then saw it was the guy from the other rest stop. He had this evil smile and started taunting me, saying "liar" repeatedly as he kept swinging the bat against my car, then staring at me with that smile and calling me a liar again. I didn't know what he was talking about, but I was able to get the car started and leave before it got worse. I called 911, my phone shaking in my hand as I drove away. I was able to meet up with an officer at a gas station where I explained the incident and was able to show the damage to my car. 2 windows were shattered and dents were scattered all over the doors, and somehow I didn't notice that my back right tire was also slashed and almost flat. Another officer went to the abandoned rest stop, finding all the glass shards on the ground, but the man was already long gone. They notified all the patrol cars of the man's appearance and vehicle, but came up empty-handed. After being stuck in an unknown town for a few days to get my car fixed, I was able to make it home safely. It's crazy how insane some people are. I mean, I assume that guy was furious over something as simple as me not giving him a few bucks for the vending machine, or even just not wanting to talk to him at 1 a.m. on the side of a highway. The fact that I could have died that night over something so absurd is horrifying.